the first two readings that we have today. In fact, a lot of the pieces of the Mass are building blocks for what we hear in the Gospel and open up understanding for us. I want to focus just on the readings, but when we go into the Eucharistic prayer, listen to the words that Father says at the beginning of it, because that's the homily also, as well as the prayer that he says before we do our readings. The whole Mass is intended to convey one message, and each Mass is different. Anyway, in Sirach today, we are reading from a book of wisdom written 250 years before Jesus and edited by the original author's grandson. It was just wisdom of the ages. Conduct your affairs with humility. And he means by that, conduct your business affairs, manage your wealth with humility, manage your authority or your power with humility. And it means, in the sense of that reading, know your limits. Learn your limits through the Proverbs. That's what the wisdom is, and you'll have joy. But then they throw something odd at the end of it. Alms atone for sins. And alms, if we're not familiar with it, could mean money or food given to the poor. I used to think that my weekly contribution to St. James was alms. It's not. So there's extra. In the New Testament, we're hearing from the book of Hebrews about a heavenly kingdom, but it's also the kingdom of God on earth. And there are citizens in that kingdom, angels, spirits of the just. But most importantly, there is Jesus as the mediator of a new covenant. He speaks for us before God. So we're called by God to approach that city and to become citizens of God's kingdom, whether here on earth or in heaven. So those are the building blocks for the gospel. The gospel was talking about this dinner that Jesus attended. And I don't want you to think of it as just Jesus, a person attending, but think of it in that sense of that reading we had, that second reading. Jesus as mediator of a new covenant coming in to talk to the leaders of his community. So in light of that New Testament understanding, he's instructing them on humility, that lesson we learned in the Old Testament. He's echoing very much his Sermon on the Mount. He uses the parable of a wedding feast where guests are invited and placed at particular tables, and he says to take the lowest table, meaning approach life with humility. Let God take you. And if you remember in Matthew, the Beatitudes, Matthew couched one of the Beatitudes this way: blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. What did he mean by that? He means that poor in spirit, meaning recognize that you need God. Recognize that we need a mediator to approach God. It's not something that we can do on our own. We need Jesus. And when you recognize that you can't earn your citizenship in heaven on your own, that's humility. You've learned your limits. But the New Testament reading added a second parable, the instruction to the host that when he has guests over, he's to invite the poor. And that echoes also Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, where he talked about how God will judge. They have the story in Matthew of God judging based on those people who helped the poor, the lame, the cripple, the blind, the stranger. He says, whatever you did to the least of these, you did for me. Welcome into my kingdom. The overarching concept here is teaching us a reverence for life, all life, created life. It's a virtue that we need to cultivate and to practice. It's a disposition of the heart, and it leads us to find the good in all things and to draw us closer to God. The reverence brings us closer to other people, to the world around us, because we don't ignore anyone. The reverent person notices and responds to the mystery of life and the sacredness of all things. So we have this doctrine of how we handle the environment with care as caregivers, how we handle each other, how we handle life. Reverence is an attitude of dependence on God and of humility, recognizing our need. And it's an appreciation of the splendor and beauty of all reality and a longing for something greater than ourselves. Reverence is self-effacing in a sense. It implies a reverence for oneself, though, as well as a reverence for God and a reverence for others. It gives voice to our desire for God, our desire to find fulfillment beyond ourselves, to be embraced by the mystery of reverence.